Okay, I'm not doing that here yet. I'm gonna need to right about now, though. Anytime you want to do that thing again. Oh. Come on. Oh, yeah. No. Oh. Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. I give credit where credit's due. At least Link is capable of emoting in this game. The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. Man, this game is kind of special to me. See, if you don't count the CDI games, and really, who does that? This is the only Legend of Zelda game up to this point on consoles I've not played. But the thing is, I've also not played it because it required a specific peripheral that pushed motion controls, which could either potentially lead to a fantastic world of adventurement and immersion, or push a bunch of bad motion controls where they don't belong. And for someone who enjoys the fact that he's always right, shut up, I am, this time, the pessimist in me felt it was the latter, and I gotta say, being right this time absolutely sucks. But, we'll get to that in a minute. The story follows our nameable hero that always defaults to Link somehow graduating to be some kind of knight in Knight Academy by winning a bird race, capture the flag type thing. And then his girl Zelda, who is not a princess but is like the daughter of a mayor, so she's kind of a princess in this society, ends up falling out of the sky, and now you gotta go rescue her. And I have to immediately stop the story right there because it actually did some interesting things prior to that point. First and foremost, they actually took the time to make Zelda a character. She's not just some collectible plot MacGuffin that's supposed to entice you towards the end of the game. Don't get me wrong, she's that. Let's not get too progressive there, hey guys? But they actually establish she has a character. There's a moment very early on where Link is getting bullied by a bunch of people and she steps in and saves his ass. In fact, it got to the point where in like the 15 minutes you know her, you kind of wish you were playing her because she's so much more of a badass than your main character. But at the same time, while they spend this time sort of offhandedly and subtly establishing her personality and her character and her relationship with you, they also fumble it pretty hard by exactly telling you that she has a relationship with you and that she has a character. No, really guys, she does. Seriously, in the same scene where she rescues you from the bullies, they go on to then tell you how you've known each other forever and you're best friends, and it's like, you know game, you were doing a pretty good job establishing that without having to beat me over the head with that fact. Another thing that really struck me as weird in the very prologue of this game is that, once again, Link exists to be a player insert character, right? Well, there's a weird moment where in a cutscene he actively talks to people around him, and yet he had no text box and it was almost as if he wasn't talking. It just feels like they were kind of sort of not really sure whether they should establish that, hey, your character actually has a character, or they should have stuck with, hey, your character is you, so maybe you should be like selecting some kind of menu option for dialogue choices because they do that anyway. But they kind of just sort of hand wave that away, which is kind of weird. But that said, the way they establish the fact that you're trying to rescue this girl who is very clearly a more charismatic and interesting person than you, and the fact that you've got a relationship because she makes up for your lack of charisma and whatever, you know, it at least endeared the plot to me up to a point. And then you get stuck with robotic exposition, Sword of Destiny, who then proceeds to tell you every single thing a second time after it's explained to you. So yeah, story writing has its up points, but not too many. But in terms of characterization, that's still leaps and bounds ahead of pretty much any other Zelda game, which, upon saying that, is horrifying. Now, I could just stop the whole review section of gameplay by just stating, oh my god, motion controls are bad, why does no one get this through their thick skulls? But let's just analyze for a second why motion controls are horrible, okay? This game came with the Wii Motion Plus, a controller accessory or alternative controller design that was supposed to give you better control and like one-to-one motion control over your games or whatever. In fact, I'm pretty sure this was the game that was supposed to push that technology, which is horrifying to say out loud, but I digress. I think conceptually, in-game, you're supposed to feel like Link, you know, you swing your sword left, the sword goes left, you hold it above your head, the sword goes there. The idea is you're in the body of Link, and the Wii Remote is your sword. That's what it's supposed to be on paper anyway. Again, I think. In actuality, you are in fact Link's shoulder socket, controlling his shoulder, to control his upper arm, to control his forearm, to control his wrist, to control his hand, to then maybe send suggestions to controls to his sword in his hand. And I say that because in a game that seems to be focusing a lot on precision, sword waving and whatever, it falls incredibly hard. Let's just start with a very basic move. This is sort of a move that is required to unlock doors and advance the story. It's the plot required ability, so to speak. It's called the Skyward Strike. And the idea is you hold the sword above your head for about a second, and then you shoot a sword beam. And then you can interact with certain bits of environment. It's an important ability. Not sure why in combat everything I use it against can either block or dodge it, but still, it's important, no really. So why is it a very simple movement, such as just holding my sword above my head, a move that should take no longer than maybe a second, takes about 15 seconds to get right, just because my angle is slightly off, or I'm not holding it like directly 90 degrees perpendicular to my shoulder or something? Like, the precision required for this is so bloody tight, and yet the actual functional hardware required to do it just isn't really up to the task. And that's the thing. Pretty much every enemy I ran into was designed around making sure you understood the precision of the controller. The Deku Babas you run into, like any other Zelda game, well, now they've got like this 4-way split-chambered mouth that you have to slash the specific way with the sword. And yet every time I seemed to do that, it didn't want to work all that well. The first boss is designed around precision of the sword mechanics. He's always blocking the way you're initially holding the sword. So the idea is you kind of have to avoid his guard and attack in the opposite way. On paper, that's great. In practice, I lost to him 4 times in a row. But, more importantly, when I did beat him, and after that, you know, the point where they kind of say, okay, you got this, use it as much as you possibly can, the best success I found was just wildly swinging my arms because it just didn't seem to work. Going back to that boss, I noticed every time he was blocking, I was going to have to swap the exact way the controller was pointing in order to hit him from the opposite side. That's simple enough, but when I did move my controller, the game seemed to think I was swinging my sword, and then he blocked it and countered, and eventually I died. A bunch. Have I mentioned yet that motion controls are bad? Well, don't worry, cause there's more coming. So, it's safe to say I was actively avoiding combat at this point because it was just bad, and it was, but that's not all. Using items requires you to like tilt the Wii Remote in certain ways. Having to go from point A to point B in your magical Sky Kingdom in the clouds, which, very cool concept, requires you to fly your magical red Sky Chicken of Justice named Drumsticks by tilting the Wii Remote to the left and right, and then to shake to go faster. Now, I'm not a robot, but if I'm shaking the Wii Remote, it's probably not going to be at the same level height that it was prior to me shaking it. So every time you move faster, you're going to have to readjust. And of course, there's a little nunchuck 3D controller over here that's completely worthless, apparently. Nintendo seems to think so. In fact, by the point where I kind of just stopped playing because I just found it so unpleasant, the only thing I ran into that I was surprised that didn't require motion controls at this point was fitting in this awkward shaped key in an awkward shaped hole in the wall. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would they ever make you do that? Yeah, all the boss keys are like that. You get this weird shaped, sort of like sculpture you have to shove in a hole that's kind of vaguely the same shape, and, you know, the game doesn't seem to think Link's smarter than a toddler and can figure out that the square peg does not go in the circle hole. No, instead you have to manually turn it and flip it until it fits just right. And again, precision. This game is all about precision, for sure. That's why we have to constantly recalibrate the controller every 2 minutes. That's great. And, you know, I know what you're probably thinking at this point. Okay, the motion controls are bad, get off it, stop harping on it, move on. But that's the thing. The motion controls are the core of this entire game. Sure, there's little bits of an actual adventure in between horrible motion controls that really shouldn't be here, but they're so small and so out of focus that it's almost not worth mentioning. But okay, I'll get off it. There's no manual camera control. You can center it around your back and lock onto stuff, and you can first-person aim it, which, again, tangentially is entirely motion controlled and required at some points. That's fun. But there's no manual control of the camera, which is awkward to say the least in some situations. Oh yeah. And your equipment breaks sometimes. Just your shield, so it's not as bad as Breath of the Wild, but I think it gave Breath of the Wild ideas, and I do not encourage that. But hey, at least you can get a magic potion that will heal your broken shield a little bit. That's a hell of a lot better than Breath of the Wild. So you know what? Thumbs up, I guess? And while I personally didn't get there, I discussed it with my brother and a couple other people who have played this game, and they said it themselves. This game gets really repetitive at points, like to the point where you fight the same boss 3 times. That's not clever, that's not interesting, that's just pointless busy work, and just a giant time fill, and that's basically what the motion controls in general are as well. Again, getting back on topic, because this is very much motion controls the game that's vaguely Legend of Zelda skinned. It ends up taking the most complex of ideas and trying to shove it into like this tiny little thing that doesn't quite get it. And the most baffling thing about it is it completely ignores a very basic understanding of how games at this point worked in relativity to our own immersion and how we do things. Just for a moment, think about what it takes for you to actively, consciously wave your hand. Now, the thing is, that really doesn't require any conscious effort. Well, it's because our brain transmits signals to our muscles to tell it to do things that we want it to do. There's not really very much conscious effort. We're not freaking Manual Samuel here, who has to consciously press a button in order to breathe. No, we're just a person who needs to breathe. And the thing about that is, we as human beings, this fantastic human machine that we are, can do very complex actions with no real conscious effort. It's amazing. But in order to transmit that through an exterior sort of input device into something else to create equally complex movement has to be done as simply as possible in order for it to remain remotely immersive and natural to us. You know, something just as simple as pressing a button to swing a sword. You know, you don't have to think about swinging your arm, you just do it. You don't really have to think about swinging your sword in a game because you just press the button. There's very little conscious input, which makes it all the more immersive. Whereas in here, the controller is constantly reminding you that in fact it's a controller you have to hold in a specific way in order to get things to work. It is about as unimmersive as all things could possibly be, because it's actively taking you out of the moment and it's actively informing you that, hey, I'm still a thing, no, you can't change it, and yes, I'm gonna be stuck with you forever, or until you give up. And I get that this entire gameplay section is basically just harping on the motion controls, but again, the motion controls are the giant exclamation point as to what this game is and how it was sold. There's no other alternatives to playing this game. You are stuck with it. And that Wii Remote controller is crammed down your throat so hard you're gonna pass out from lack of oxygen, because not a moment goes by that you don't have to actively make some kind of input and take you immediately out of the experience. And that, from creating some sort of immersive experience, is just mind-blowingly atrocious. Like, why did no one raise their hand at this? Was it just a matter of trying to push the equipment? I'm not sure, but it is. I'm not going to say that the motion controls make this game unplayable, because that's an exaggeration, but it certainly makes it take way longer than it needs to. It takes you out of the experience, and it really makes things basically torturously unpleasant. And I think that's basically the best way to explain the gameplay. Yeah, there's nice things here and there, the world design's kinda okay, but every step of the way you are basically told, hey, nope, stop, you can't enjoy this game until you waggle your arm a little bit in an exact specific way that we tell you to. And if you're not holding the Wii Remote in the right way, well then flip it the other way, because for whatever reason, sometimes other things require you to hold it another way. Thanks, balancing tightropes for whatever reason. But that's the thing. I've been doing nothing but harping on the motion controls, but the motion controls are this game, and I think that's the most telling thing about the experience. Now, the overall presentation to Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is excellent. I mean, it's Zelda. I would think that at this point we've kind of come to expect that, but visually it looks quite nice. It has its own sort of unique take on the visual style. It's got nice lights, almost pastel colors. It likes its very, very faint colors, and it likes its sort of stylized cartoony look. Not quite, say, to the same sort of extremes Wind Waker took it, but sort of a nice medium between that and, say, Twilight Princess in terms of visual design. And you know, the character designs, the enemies, and everything, they all look great. The only thing visually I don't care much for is something about Link's giant lips just don't look right. And they work on everyone else, but him, it just doesn't quite work. And hey, they actually managed to get him to emote. It's a shame that emotion is exactly how I feel about this game, but thanks for being a great example there, Link. Basically, visually, it's fantastic, and audio-wise, it is absolutely phenomenal. Like I said about the overall presentation, I think we kind of come to expect an excellent sound design from Zelda, and you know, this game does not disappoint. I definitely have got to track down the soundtrack to this game, because if nothing else, that is the absolute high point of this game. So, yeah, good job, Skyward Sword. You've done what we've come to expect from Zelda. But you know what? You did it well, damn it. Be proud of that. Now, if you want a copy of Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, well, it's a first-party Nintendo title, so it's basically about as expensive as it was at launch. Bear in mind, you do need to have a Wii Remote Plus in order to play this. If you're crazy enough to want to. But I have to give a big shout out and thank you to my girlfriend for including this in the box of trades I made her. And she even included a Wii Remote Plus that let me definitely experience this thing. Now, do I recommend this game? Absolutely not. I mean, first of all, you have to jump through the hoops of actually owning a Wii Remote Plus to play it, which is only applicable to, like, what, maybe 6 games at this point? Certainly only 3 that I'm aware of and actually care about, but still. And even then, you have to enjoy awkward flailing of your hands and readjusting and reconnecting and having the hardware fight you every single step of the way. But, I mean, if you're into that and you enjoy that, there's a lot of this game you're going to enjoy. That said, you should also probably get yourself sectioned, because what's wrong with you? That's terrible. And I mean, I think that's the thing. Before this, there was Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on the Wii, where they sort of awkwardly added motion controls in. But even then, it was just mainly aiming and then occasionally flicking your Wii remote to swing a sword. And it wasn't remotely accurate or anything, but, you know, while it wasn't as enjoyable as, say, the GameCube version that didn't change a bunch of stuff and added that for no reason, at the very least, it was more functional, because I think Nintendo understood that the game was not designed with this, and their motion controls really weren't as great as they wanted everyone to believe. Whereas this, they are parading it around. They are announcing it from the rooftops. No, this is the greatest motion control will ever be, and the fact is, it's not. I mean, heck, this can't even understand the way you're holding the Wii Remote, specifically. If you are a lefty, you are still holding the thing with your right hand, and that's going to be a little bit awkward. If you want to reverse grip the sword behind your back, yeah, Link's not going to get that. This game barely understands a simple standard grip with a right-handed figure, and even then, you're going to be struggling every step of the way. It's constantly trying to give this to you and say there's no other options. Well, there is an option. Don't play this game, because Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword does something that no other Zelda has ever done. It's been a bad game, because the fact is, while there have been other Zelda games I didn't like, they were at least perfectly fine functional games. They just didn't suit my taste. This one is just unpleasant. And at the end of the day, Skyward Sword tries to awkwardly raise its sword to the sky, missing the exact precise angle needed to lay out its laser beam sword slash, and instead gets struck by lightning, because that's basically what this game is. It misses the mark in precision, it misses the mark in enjoyment, and it just fails on pretty much every level to be a remotely enjoyable or immersive experience. I mean, they all are, I guess, but still. And that's how you do things right.